We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to an inside look at vendor product development practices. Just two quick announcements. I wanted to remind everyone of the conference code of conduct, which of course we are going along with. If you would like to review that, it is available online in the conference portal. Finally, we will be using microphones just to ensure that the audio is picked up by the recording of this session. So I'm sure some of you out there are loudspeakers like me, but we are all going to be using the microphone, especially during the Q&A. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to our wonderful presenters.
Thank you so much, Larry, and thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time, still relatively early in the morning, to join us for this session. The goal here is to give you an inside look at vendor product development practices, and to that end, I was able to recruit three lovely representatives of a diverse set of vendors to talk a bit about processes, both at their own organizations and more broadly in the publishing ecosystem. So my name is Michael Rodriguez. I'm a content and scholarly communication strategist at Lyrasis, and I'm the organizer and moderator of today's panel. Our panel today focuses on the more traditional database-type products that are sold as subscriptions or as one-time purchases with perpetual rights. And I ask our speakers to respond to questions like, how do vendors decide when to bring a new product to market of this type? How do they go about finding content and forging strategies for developing new resources? And what internal processes do they have to determine community needs and product viability? So I'm very pleased to welcome our three speakers, starting with Stephen, president at Coherent Digital. Stephen will address how he and his colleagues realized a need for Coherent Digital's various database products and went about identifying and producing them. Also with us is Lenny. They'll introduce themselves in full in just a moment. He is vice president at Bloomsbury Digital Resources, and he'll speak about profit loss statements and how publishers use these analyses to project returns on potential new products and determine product viability. And finally, we have Courtney, a product manager at EBSCO, who will explain how EBSCO goes about understanding customer and end user needs, curates content, and designs user experience for its aggregator databases. And each of our three speakers will present for about 10 minutes before we move into Q&A at the end. And Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So my thanks to Michael for inviting me, and my thanks to you for showing up. I'm Stephen. I've been publishing in the electronic space for a very long time. I hope some of you have bought some of the products I've produced over the years, maybe literature online, maybe academic video online. What I thought I'd do today is talk in general terms and then lead you through a particular product development. So I'm going to start with, it's not rocket science. So really what we're doing as vendors, we feel, is to find market needs and match those to the skills within the company. If you take a look at the processes, really they're very straightforward. There's an orange phase I've put here, which is research, planning, bibliography. And up until that point, we're not sure whether we're going to do a product. But then what we look for from the market is, can we get a wow? And the wow factor is really, really important because many librarians are shy and will not tell you if they think the product's really bad. So I've got instances, for example, where I had an idea for an architecture project, and the feedback was, oh my God, that's amazing. Columbia would really like that. And that was language for, actually, we have no intention of buying this. It's not really for us. So we really spend a lot of time making sure we get to that factor of somebody saying, look, this is really good. And then on the converse, we say to ourselves, is this possible with the skills that we actually have within the organization? Can we do it? So if I take you through a particular example, a couple of years ago, we noticed that the amount of content in Africa was absolutely voluminous, but its accessibility was really bad. And in fact, most Western libraries, collections, had fewer than 4% of the collections actually materials from Africa. And at the same time, we noticed that despite the availability of mobile phones in the African continent, a lot of the material there was simply inaccessible. Then there's the physical archive side of things. And this particular map here is a map of archives. And as you can see, there's a ton of archives documented in North America, hundreds documented in Europe, but very few in Africa. And the more we looked at the problem, the more the market need became evident. At the same time, we looked on the open web and saw that, oh my goodness, there's literally 1 million plus individual items, sometimes hosted here in the States, sometimes hosted in Europe, sometimes hosted in Africa. And a lot of these primary sources were in danger of disappearing. Many of the websites that created them flowered like beautifully for 2 or 3 years, and then funding ran out and the content disappeared. So that was the market need, and we looked at what skills do we have? What can Coherent actually do? Well, we've built some tools here that allow us to capture content much more cheaply than most systems. And we have automated tools that do automated indexing. So we were like, maybe we could use these tools to actually address this problem. We have a publishing engine, which is relatively similar to the engines you're familiar with from vendors like ProQuest and EBSCO. And then finally, we had some tools for engagement. So this led us to a concept, and the concept was, could we capture, digitize, enrich, and disseminate African content far more effectively than other vendors and that was currently happening in the marketplace? Now, the most important thing for me in product management, I'm sorry about the bumping, I'm trying to keep as still as possible. I don't think it's me. So anyway, expert feedback is really, really important. And my thanks to all of you in this room who are librarians. Over and over again, we have an idea, and the library feedback is, have you heard of X? Do you know about Y? You know, this particular thing isn't really good, or this is really where the opportunity is. And in our development of Africa Commons, it was absolutely no exception. We spent months going through websites and looking, asking questions like, are the websites out there really high quality? Is there more than DPLA and Europeana available in this space? And we found some absolutely incredible content. I'm going to highlight a couple here. Is anybody from UCLA in the audience? Well, UCLA, you did an amazing job. This Mighty Man comic is part of the International Digital Ephemera Project at UCLA. It purports to be the first born African superhero, and it's an incredible magazine comic of 8 particular issues. The kicker is that it was actually produced by the South African government, so the justice that Mighty Man promulgates is actually apartheid justice. That's an incredible document, but it's really, really hard to find unless you know it's there. Similarly, if I take Speak Magazine, this is a magazine from a women's collective. It's hosted on a site in South Africa, Digital Innovation South Africa. Who would have thought that that particular, if you do a search in Google for it, you probably won't find it. And that would assume, again, that you know it's there. So in interacting with the team and with librarians, we're constantly asking ourselves, if we were to aggregate this material, would it be valuable? We also noticed some of the material itself had really good contextualization. So in the middle there, which isn't that hard to see, is for a document, an audio file from the Open Sudan archive. It is a song to persuade teenagers to join the Sudanese civil war. It's called Let's All Go to the Military Training. And it's in a language that most of us won't understand, but it's been translated into English. And if you want to convey to students how exactly it feels and what kind of propaganda is being used, this is the most unbelievable artifact. So the more we look, the more we realize, okay, aggregation, yes, definitely, there's a lot out there that we could index and add value to. But at the same time, we started to hear from librarians about the need for preservation. So we took a look, and this actually, these sites on the left here are from a major academic research library, their LibGuide. More than 50% of the links were broken. And I don't have time here to go through each of these items one by one, but the URL africanmusicprofiles.com, which used to be a great biographical resource for African musicians, has now become a Japanese dating website. The Bank of Sierra Leone is actually advocating you invest in marijuana stocks. The Africa Rib site, I don't even know what that site was. And sites like the Internet Archive are great, but typically they only go shallow. They don't go in depth. There's not so much curation. So we said to ourselves, it looks like we've got definitely an aggregation need, and we've definitely got a preservation need. So then we went to the technology fit. How does our technology actually help do this? Well, thanks to one of our developers here, we've actually developed a mechanism whereby you can upload content and the automated tools will make this indexed and accessible really quickly. So this would work really, really well. And suddenly we realized, wow, if you're actually at an underfunded institution, you'd be in a position to upload the content directly in the database, which would help with the aggregation and would help with the preservation. Then we have to do a technology check. Is the technology that we have in terms of disseminating it going to work? Are the fields that we're able to accommodate in our retrieval engine going to match? And after all of that, we came to a straightforward system. And we decided, right, we're going to aggregate over 600 organizations, 2,100 collections, 250,000 items. We're going to offer free hosting of content. We're going to enable African institutions to actually participate for free. And we're going to take a portion of the revenues of people in the West subscribing to this database and make that available for digitization. So the market need and our technology and our whole come together fit. Then we go back to the market again. Is this something that's worthwhile? And yeah, we got a wow. So the wow then told us, right, now we've got to execute. And I'm not going to spend a long time here. In 10 minutes, there's really not much time to go through in detail. But I can tell you that from my perspective as a vendor, the actual production aspects are largely pedestrian. My apologies if any of my production team's listening at home. But really what it's a question of is executing. And there are many, many examples. I suspect many of you in this room are experts in these items here. What's really hard is to actually get that bond between the market need and actually the skill set. And together then have something that's really exceptional. So I'm going to stop there and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Stephen. That was excellent. I'll hand things over to Lenny next.
Good morning. The bad kids always sit in the back, I'm just saying. So you get a gold star for daring to venture into row 3. I'm Lenny Allen. I'm VP of Sales and Marketing at Bloomsbury Academic and Professional. And I'm just going to do a kind of quick, like from 30,000 feet overview of new online product assessment. So basically, like, how do we decide, like, what goes into the decision making? What's the decision making process behind deciding to launch a new online product? And then I'm also going to talk briefly about the P&L, which I will explain shortly. So when we're thinking about, okay, you know, and we bring new online products to market all the time. So what is the process behind that? Step one, the initial concept. So you're basically identifying a gap in the market or a new approach to a discipline. Like, and is there a new way of approaching a discipline? Obviously, there's an online product for almost every discipline at this point, but disciplines evolve, in different ways, and there are different approaches. The next step is the editorial proposal, which basically outlines the concept for that product in a kind of brief, like 2-page, kind of just gives an overview of what that product would look like, what the market is for it. That then gets presented to a board in a monthly meeting where we have like a kind of brief discussion, review. Different stakeholders within the business, sales, marketing, editorial, production are feeding back on the potential viability of that product and deciding whether we're going to take it forward or not. So if it gets approved in that initial state, we take it forward, and then ... If it doesn't, well, that's sort of the end of it. Sometimes things come back later on; they can be reworked. That's been known to happen. But if it gets approved, then the editor will prepare a full proposal, and that includes a fair amount of market research, which I'll then describe. So one of the first things they're going to do is look at what is the market universe for a product. So if you want to launch or develop a product in philosophy, how many institutions have philosophy programs? It could be something really specific within philosophy, in which case you're going to want to drill down and understand. And there are different tools for understanding what your market universe is. And again, because there isn't a lot of time, I'm not going to get into that. Then there are surveys for researchers and librarians. And when we're doing a full proposal for a new digital resource, the minimum in terms of number of surveys that editor is going to work on and collect is about 50. So it's pretty extensive. So we're getting a lot of feedback from both researchers in the discipline and also librarians. And then, of course, we're looking at the competitor landscape. What other products are out there? What need are they filling? How is a new product going to distinguish itself from what's out there already? So I thought it would be interesting just to pull in, these are actual questions from the surveys that we do for market research. So some of the sample questions for librarians are things like, if we were to create a dedicated digital resource in X discipline, what content and features would you expect it to include? How might that resource improve upon existing resources? How is it different? Does it need to have different functionality? Is the approach to the subject different enough to merit launching a new product? And then there's different questions, obviously, for researchers who are focused on different things. So how likely would you be to recommend it to your librarian? If your library had access to this resource, how would you use it in a class as an assigned reading, if at all? And it's always interesting for me to see, I think a big part of the review process from a sales and marketing perspective is seeing what those researchers and librarians have to say, because they tend to be pretty frank. And so sometimes editors are trying to, they're trying to convince you that this is a viable product, and that doesn't always come through in the feedback on the survey. Sometimes it does. I mean, sometimes the feedback is consistently good, but then sometimes you get other kind of feedback, and you have to sort of understand what the context is for it, or it requires sometimes going back and getting more information. And then I wanted to just cover briefly, I thought it'd be interesting to talk about what the P&L looks like for digital, like a digital resource on the digital publishing side. And maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I did a presentation about what the P&L looks like for the scholarly monograph, primarily in print. And I realized when I started talking about P&Ls that librarians don't generally know what the P&L is, and so it stands for profit and loss. And it's basically, it's a massive, for a digital product, it's basically a massive Excel template that has about, 12 to 15 tabs. So you're basically putting into this template every single cost that's associated with the build out of a digital resource. So, and there's a P&L for every single thing. Everything that is, whether it's a book, a journal, a reference work, whether it's in print or in digital, everything that you're acquiring has a P&L behind it. And there's a P&L regardless. So I think when you say, because it stands for profit and loss, and you hear profit, you think, well, it's for only like a commercial publisher would produce a P&L. But actually it doesn't matter if you're a commercial press, a not-for-profit, a university press, there's a P&L behind every single thing that we're publishing. And that's just part of, being a kind of financially responsible business and sustainable. So the P&L also includes the sales forecast in addition to all of the costs that go into the production of a digital resource. And then that P&L template will generate a margin that tells you what whether it's profitable or not. And so, if it's not, you could start tweaking things. Do we think we could do better on the sales forecast? We use it at Bloomsbury. I'm also speaking in some ways when we get into, I'll show you details about the P&L and some of the costs. They're specific to Bloomsbury. But are there, it's like then you start getting into things like, okay, do we think we could do better on the sales side? Or are there ways we can cut costs in other areas? So that then, whatever margin the P&L, kind of spits out, then generates a whole nother discussion. It's very rare that you kind of get a perfect P&L on the, on the first try. So I thought it might be interesting just to show some of the costs, again, very specific to Bloomsbury, but in some ways, and some ways not. So the cost of developing a new platform, anywhere from $750,000 to $1.5 million. So that's basically for building out your own proprietary platform. It's not for it's not to develop every new product, because once you've developed your own platform, you can then obviously build out products on that platform. But that also obviously requires more functionality. It could be different functionality depending on what the product is or the discipline. So that's another, like, in the 50 to 200,000 range for building out that additional functionality. And then you've got hosting fees. Other key costs. I put in some costs and then some things I just left out because it's so, it's so general and it really depends on what you're doing. But you've got royalties, you've got marketing, you've got an access control system that obviously allows for trials and, and subscription and perpetual access. You've got costs for content conversion. You've got costs for content licensing, where you might be licensing content to bring in. And then you've got a cost to basically build out and maintain an editorial board. And then just to continue with the cost, you've got MARC records, DOIs, the cost of indexing. You've got the cost of ensuring that your product is accessible, that you've got correct, counter-compliant usage statistics. You've got discovery services. You've got knowledge bases. And there are other costs, but these are really some of the key costs. I thought it'd be interesting to list out, just to kind of show what goes into, everything that goes into building out a digital resource. And then, once a digital resource is launched, it's not a digital product isn't a kind of thing you build and then you make it go live and then you kind of turn to the next thing. It's really like a living, breathing animal. And it's got to be updated, and it's, the functionality has to be updated, the accessibility standards have to be updated. You've got UX, you've got metadata, and then, all the things that go into feeding our data out to discovery services. And again, this is kind of like a sampling, but, so it isn't like, it's not an end point once it launches. It's really kind of the beginning of an ongoing process in perpetuity. So, and each of these functions bears a cost. And so I think that might be my last slide. Is that right? Can I? Yeah, okay. So that's the P&L, and I look forward to the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lenny. I'll hand things over to Courtney next.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to my co-presenters. My name's Courtney Peckham. I am with EBSCO's product management team. I've been with EBSCO for about 15 years now. And I'm going to talk about how we focus on libraries and users in our product development process. Basically, it all starts with a problem. There was a time for many years that EBSCO would design products around opportunities or deals or a great idea. That's no longer the way we approach it. We want to identify and solve a problem. And to do this, we really have to understand user behavior and library needs. We listen, learn, engage with customers and users very regularly, and we collect qualitative and quantitative data We use tools such as user testing, focus groups, interviews, strategic direction meetings, market research surveys, advisory boards, and telemetry. And first, to look at problems at libraries. We look at both our libraries are our customers, and of course our end users are our users, and are very diverse. But to focus on problems at libraries, one of the techniques we use is that we create buyer personas. And these personas help us focus and help, especially folks, I would say, who might be in software development or, folks who don't really have the opportunity to go out and meet with customers. It really makes them understand who they're building for and why. And so we have many buyer personas, but I chose to have Marla here represent them because her needs are pretty typical of our of library needs. She wants to ensure long-term access and maximize her return on investment. She wants to find and evaluate resources that will satisfy users, get high usage, that's very important, all within budget. All of our buyer personas, our librarians and administrators, budget is a top concern. She also wants to be able to implement these resources in a way that's streamlined with the rest of the library systems. So to address Marla's content needs, we have a group of experts at EBSCO with backgrounds that are aligned to our research databases portfolio. And our team consists of 12 product managers and 4 business analysts. We have a number of advanced degrees among us, business to history to art history and environmental science. 7 of us are librarians, including myself. And collectively, we have over 200 years of experience at EBSCO. And so we use this experience and this insight along with our engagement with customers to execute on what is EBSCO's full-text database strategy. And this is something we consider of a 6-pillar kind of model, beginning with we license journals for our products that don't duplicate your library's existing collections. We know that libraries don't want to pay for content twice. Budgets are very, very tight, and this is extremely important to them. We look at journals receiving high usage in reputable subject indexes. On EBSCOhost, we have all of the top subject indexes, APA, MLA, ATLA, many, many others. And so we're able to look at usage and understand which are the most used titles on these various databases, indexes. We will not license blatantly low-quality journals that compromise research. And that, of course, is something that is an issue in the open access realm. But however, we do very much support open access as value add, meaning we include it in products, but we don't include it in pricing. And this is important to our users because, of course, scholars really don't care whether it's an open access journal or a for-fee journal, as long as it's a high-quality journal in their field. We look at top-ranked journals within a field of study, and we always aim to license a title without an embargo. We're not always able to do that, but it's always our goal. And we add high-quality metadata and serve it up with a powerful search engine. And we always ensure that the content we're choosing is representative of diverse voices. We want to promote diversity of thought across disciplines and subject areas. And so, as a whole, our curation strategy helps Marla achieve her goals of getting excellent content at a price that her institution can afford. Now, moving to problems for users. We serve a wide range of researchers, starting with Eric, the efficiency seeker, who just wants to discover topics for his research, make sure that the material he's looking at is acceptable to his professor, and that it's cited properly. He just wants to get his paper done. And then there's Emma, the research enthusiast, who may be an upperclassman, and she is actually, maybe considering grad school. And her goals are to select topics carefully, find quality resources that support her thesis. She wants to be able to support a scholarly argument, and she wants to conduct research effectively. And then on the far side of the power researcher, Paula, who is perhaps a faculty member or a PhD student, her goals are to contribute to the scholarly community or her career. She wants to publish quality research, and she wants to organize, share, and collaborate with others. So we have to think about all these different personas as we develop products for users. Our process, this is a very busy slide, so I'll just take it at a high level. Our framework for user research is to begin with understanding and discovering. We want to identify gaps and needs, and then we begin to explore, look at potential solutions, and determine if they are solving the problems. Then improve and evaluate. We test our solution and expose a user to it and see if we can improve on what we have developed. And then we measure and benchmark to keep users engaged and happy. So the first part of this process is, are we building the right thing? And the latter part of this process is, are we building the thing right? And I thought I'd include a quick case study on the product development that happened fairly recently, released last August, Ethnic Diversity Source. This was actually created for a very specific purpose. We had customers whose universities were required to have ethnic diversity courses required by their legislatures. And so we developed a product that focuses on the lived experience of ethnic communities in the US. And we will and have been expanding coverage coverage of subjects and time periods and groups of people as we receive feedback from libraries and users. And although it was created for very specific customers, because of the feedback and engagement with customers, it's been chosen by universities all across the US and in Canada and even some high schools. And in the course of understanding the needs for ethnic diversity source, we realized through our user research and our customer engagement that our standard content for an academic product, which is typically academic journals, was not enough in this case. People were asking for a lot of first-person accounts, like speeches and letters and interviews, primary sources. Those are considered extremely valuable for presenting diverse points of view. And for this particular product, these content types will continue to evolve as we engage with customers and understand the evolving needs for ethnic diversity source. So there is, in a nutshell, our process. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Courtney, and to all of our speakers. I think we have maybe 5 or 6 minutes for Q&A. If anyone has a question, go ahead and raise your hand, and Larry will bring the mic to you.
Yeah, so this is a question for, I forget your first name, Ms. Peckham? Courtney, I'm sorry, yes. So when you were looking to create full-text databases, you said one of the things that you do is try to avoid journal duplication with existing collections. Does that mean existing EBSCO databases or databases that most likely academic libraries would have?
Both. If these, is this working? If titles are largely sourced directly from publishers in packages, we will probably not go for them. And we also look at what is EBSCO offering on other products. And if you're a customer and we happen to have the same content on 2 products that you're looking at, we do price it taking that into consideration. So, yeah, but we look for unique content on all of our new products.
Hi, y'all. Erin Gallagher, University of Florida. Thank you. First of all, I just want to start with a plea, which is please share this information with us more regularly. This has been really illuminating and terrific. And as someone who manages acquisitions and collections at a large, R1 university, I never see this, and this has been so wonderful to see. I was not familiar with P&L. I've never seen numbers laid out that granularly before. Really what I see is an email saying, hey, we have this new product, here's how much it's going to cost. And that's great too, but this would go so far for us to, see this sort of information illuminated more regularly. So that's my plea that I'm going to start with. But my question is, so Stephen, you mentioned that librarians are shy and that we don't often like to say when we don't like something. I don't know about the shy thing so much, but I totally feel you on the other piece that we aren't always so open about what we don't like. We're nice, we're a nice bunch. We don't want to hurt your feelings. But at the same time, I'm wondering if there's an element of trust there, because as a member of some advisory boards, we get together a couple times a year. I am engaging with the same people and getting to know the same people year after year and quarter after quarter in these meetings. And I find that as time goes on, the honesty kind of bubbles up. You start being a bit more frank with each other. So I'm wondering, how do y'all, this is a question for the entire panel, how do y'all work toward building that kind of relationship or that sustained engagement in a world where there's so much churn of products and people in your organizations, to where you can kind of get at that trust building?
Well, first of all, I should say I think humans naturally are shy. And many librarians, especially after you've bought a product, will be extremely vocal, which I appreciate too. I think your point's well on the mark. Trust is huge. In the conversations that I've had, I think one of the biggest advantages a little company like Coherent has is the fact that we've got relationships. My team collectively has, Gulp, 250 years of experience working with librarians and libraries, and trust is absolutely essential. Having said all of that, it's very rare, I find, for people actively to say they really hate something. Most people want to give feedback in a positive way. And as a vendor, I think it can be very hard, especially if you've got a product manager who's really enthusiastic about something, to hear what somebody's actually saying, especially if it comes in. So my encouragement is, please be as direct as you can, and absolutely on trust. The more trust there is, the better.
Did you want me to also answer, address that, or do we want to move on to another question? No, I would just say, I think that's right. It's important to have trust between publisher and vendor and librarians. I tend to find that as I mentioned, the feedback is often pretty blunt. And we've also had the experience of launching a new product and then immediately getting feedback on something not being right, whether it's pricing or functionality or something else. And I think if you can then take that feedback and go back and correct it, again, sometimes it's pricing model, sometimes it's a functionality issue. I think you can go back and say, okay, we've listened to what you had to say and we've made this correction. I think that also you start to develop a sense of trust with the market, and that you're actually listening to what librarians have to say about the products that you're launching.
I would just add, it's been our experience, because our sales force has great relationships with our customers, but having product managers engage with customers instead of sales, separately from sales, really, so it has been really, really helpful, because it takes out that element of, well, you're trying to sell me something, right? And that's been really positive for our experience.
We have time for maybe one more if anyone has a very quick question. In that case, let's hear it for our panel.